Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. And you know what, man? I always hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I just got to tell you, my friend, that's right, I'm back. After somewhat of a prolonged absence, about 3 months, according to my math, since I've last spoken to you. Now, as much as I'm sure you appreciated our time apart, it wasn't entirely by choice, mind you. My wife and I have been up to some relatively serious adulting as of late, which has greatly diminished the amount of time that I have to spend in the toy aisle of life. Now, if you are one of those poor, unfortunate souls that has spent any amount of time paying attention to this YouTube channel over the past couple of years, now keep in mind, I have no idea why you would be, but if in fact you are, you've probably already recognized that the Archaic Records room looks dramatically different than it did the last time I spoke to you. That is because my wife and I recently entered into the world of home ownership. Now, if you are from Tennessee, that's your cue to say, of course you did. Goddamn California's my whole state. Now, that may or may not be true, but the point is that it took my wife and I a couple months to not only find the house that we were looking for, but to get moved in, get settled, get sort of acclimated to our new surroundings, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, Archaic Records was sort of put on the back burner. That isn't to suggest that I didn't enjoy taking a break from social media in all of the ways that it enriches our lives. But I'd also be lying to you if I said that over the past couple weeks I wasn't sort of itching to get back into the saddle again, and today's episode finally inspired me to pull the trigger. But everything with the house is awesome. These are my new digs. What do you think? Pretty snug, huh? The neighborhood that we are living in is quite lovely. Now, I do have one sort of minor quibble about the neighborhood that my wife and I settled in. That is that for some reason, the street that we live on, which is just on the other side of this wall, you will probably be able to hear it from time to time on this channel. I mean, unfortunately, there really isn't anything I can do about that until I make enough cake off of this show in order to soundproof my studio. It's just one of those sort of minor inconveniences that you and I are going to have to mutually deal with. But right outside this window, right here, some of the hillbillies that live in this area, they use our street as a place to drag race, which at the end of the day doesn't really bother me so much, but man, it absolutely ties my wife's panties in a knot. Just the other day, she was telling me that she wanted to petition our city in order to put speed bumps on our street. And I asked her, I said, what are you trying to become, Gladys Kravitz? Now, keep in mind, I realize that it is references like that that keep this show anchored to the very bottom, but that's just the type of entertainment that you've become accustomed to here on Archaic Records. That really isn't the point here. The point is to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. And in true tradition of the Morrissey Monday program, it isn't Monday. It is something that I didn't really put a lot of forethought into when I named the show Morrissey Monday, that Monday is generally my busiest day of the week. In fact, it's probably the one day of the week that I have the least amount of time to plop my fat ass in front of this camera and try to entertain a bunch of people who have no interest at all in what I'm doing. In fact, today is Saturday, April 26th, 2025. And the reason why that is significant is because unless there is some late-breaking news that I am unfamiliar with, now keep in mind, I was just checking the web a few minutes ago, making sure that I wasn't making more of an ass out of myself than I normally do. Our good friend Stephen Patrick Morrissey is currently in Reno, Nevada, where he is going to kick off the North American leg of his 2025 spring tour this evening in the biggest little city in the world. The tour will continue on through May 17th, where he will wrap up the North American leg of his tour in Hollywood, Florida. After tonight's show in Reno, Morrissey will be heading to Fresno, California on April 28th, followed by Bakersfield on April 30th. Now, Nothing like scouring through the armpit of California. Now, if you live out here in Tennessee, you will be reminded every day that all of California is the armpit of California. In fact, California is the armpit of the United States. But that particular part of the Central Valley in California, if you are a native or a local of California, it's just known that Fresno and Bakersfield are about as low as you're possibly going to get in terms of the geography of the state. In fact, I remember several years ago, I was living in Santa Cruz, California, and over by the boardwalk one day, which is a very touristy area, I saw this giant truck, and in the back window of the truck, in huge letters, it spelled out the word Fresno. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? If I lived in Fresno, I would probably lie. I don't think that it is something that I would advertise. Now, as if Fresno isn't necessarily bad enough, as I mentioned before, on April 30th, Morrissey will be playing in Bakersfield, California. I mean, I don't know, was Tulare booked that night, Steve? I don't know what you're thinking playing Fresno and Bakersfield. Now, again, you might be saying to yourself, well, Jim, that's a little bit harsh. I mean, you're a Californian. You're always picking on people that are picking on California, so how dare you? How dare you diminish the traits of Bakersfield? If you're one of those people that thinks that, apparently you've never been to Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield is... Actually, it's funny. I was just driving through Bakersfield a few years ago, and Bakersfield is a place that I've sort of driven through. That's the whole purpose of Bakersfield. If you live in the Bay Area and you're on your way to Los Angeles or San Diego, the whole purpose of Bakersfield existing is to be someplace you drive through. But recently, well, I shouldn't even say it was that recently, it was pre-COVID. My wife and I were driving from San Francisco down to the Bay Area, and we drove through Bakersfield. And suddenly Bakersfield, I don't know if this is a new development or if it's something that Bakersfield's just something I've sort of blocked out of my head over the years being from California, but suddenly Bakersfield has become this very big city. I don't know if it's because so many people are leaving the Bay Area and Southern California, and that's just like the kind of place, I guess that's the place maybe you can just afford to end up, is Bakersfield. But man, every time I feel a little bit wishy-washy about living out here in Tennessee, I think to myself, thank God it isn't Bakersfield. I mean, Bakersfield's only real cultural contribution over the past 50 years is the band Korn. I mean, isn't that all you need to know? If you're a fan of Korn, that is something that you need to have explained to me, because Korn stink, and they always have stunk, and this is the only time that Korn will ever be mentioned on Archaic Records. In fact, I remember distinctly the first time that I ever heard Korn. I was in San Francisco. I had gone to see Danzig at the Warfield. Now, this was probably in the mid-1990s, if I'm not mistaken. And at this advanced age, I could be, and if I am mistaken, I'm sure that you will let me know. But I went to go see Danzig at the Warfield in San Francisco. I believe, again, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the Danzig 4 tour, which in my opinion is still Danzig's best solo album. And I believe that there were two opening bands that night. One of them was Marilyn Manson, I believe. That was the first time I saw Marilyn Manson, was he opened for Danzig. Now, I do know for a fact that the first time I saw Marilyn Manson, he opened for Danzig at the Warfield in San Francisco. Now, I think it was the same show. I think that the first band to play that night was this band that I believe I had heard by name, but I had no idea what they sounded like. I had no idea who they were. I think that I had heard the name, and they were the first band to play that night, and they came out on stage, and the first thing I thought of when I saw them, at least aesthetically, was I thought, wow, this band sort of reminds me of Suicidal Tendencies, at least based on their aesthetic. They had, this sort of urban, sort of hip-hop kind of aesthetic. And as soon as they started playing, I remember thinking to myself, man, this is definitely not my luggage. But at the same time, I also became keenly aware that this band was going to be huge, because for some reason, they just got this epic response from the crowd, at least the show that I was at the Warfield in San Francisco, but that was the first time I heard Korn. It was sort of a dark day. It's sort of a dark day in your life the first day you hear Korn. You kind of reminisce the days when you had never heard of Korn, because they just are absolutely the worst. And really, over the past 50 years, that is really the only cultural contribution that the city of Bakersfield's made. Now, I know what you're going to say. What about Buck Owens, Jim? What about Merle Haggard? What about all of that? What about the Bakersfield sound? Well, yes, I acknowledge that was an important part of the California music scene. I'm not necessarily a big country music guy. I know that's sort of sacrilegious living out here in Nashville, although I will acknowledge the contribution that Buck Owens and Merle Haggard and that whole sort of Bakersfield sound made to country music. In fact, it's sort of interesting. There is a place here in Nashville, this little eatery, right downtown, right near the Bridgestone Arena, and it is called Bakersfield. Now, what Bakersfield is it is sort of a California taco tequila bar, a little bit overpriced, a little bit overly fancy. My wife and I went there one night before we went to an event at Bridgestone Arena. If I'm not mistaken, it was before we went to go to a hockey game, and the place was nice enough, and it wasn't necessarily our scene. It was a place where you sort of, buy overpriced tacos and drink overpriced tequila, and my wife was sort of snickering that this sort of bougie, fancy place was called Bakersfield, because she thought, well, obviously she told me, she said, the person that opened this restaurant has never been to California, because they would understand that Bakersfield is a shithole. Now, of course, my wife at the time didn't really understand the whole Bakersfield country music thing, and I sort of had to explain to her, not that I try to be Johnny Know-It-All, but I tried to explain to her. I said, I think it's called Bakersfield because of the country music thing, because it's Nashville, get it? Anyway, that's not really the point here. The point is that Morrissey will be playing in Bakersfield at the Fox Theater on April 30th. I mean, don't you just envy Steve? I mean, Reno's one of those cities that gets kind of a bad rap, but I actually kind of like Reno. I know what you're going to say. You like Reno because you're trash, Jim. I'm not going to disagree with that, but hey, Reno isn't too far from where I grew up. In fact, there was a time in my adolescence when my mother was thinking about moving to Reno from the town that I was living in at the time, and I thought to myself, hey, Reno isn't exactly the Emerald City, but anything's better than this dump. After Bakersfield, Morrissey comes to his senses a little bit, because on May 1st he will be in San Diego, California. Now, San Diego is a city that I really like a lot. San Diego is a city, though, as a Californian, I think is a city that gets a little bit too much of a hand job from people that aren't from California. I think that people that aren't from California typically think of San Diego as being their favorite city in California. I always hear people all the time at my work tell me that they don't like San Francisco, they don't like Los Angeles, but man, I love San Diego. Isn't it just so great? Because San Diego, at the end of the day, of the 3 or 4 major cities in California, although it is beautiful, it's right on the water, I would say stereotypically, it's probably the most California of all the cities in California. I think in a lot of ways it is the most bland. I don't think it is in any way as cool as San Francisco. Now, of course, over the past several years, I'd say really since like COVID, San Francisco has taken on this whole reputation that to me is completely unwarranted. People think of San Francisco as being this third world hellhole, basically a war zone. I hear people tell me all the time, I'd never go to San Francisco, not unless I was packing heat, Jim. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've spent most of my adult life living in the Bay Area, but San Francisco, although, yeah, San Francisco has a lot of homeless people, and although, yeah, San Francisco's always had a little bit of a cleanliness issue, I don't think it has really changed that much, apart from the fact that nobody can afford to live there. Nobody that I know can afford to live there, which is why my wife and I purchased a house in Tennessee, son. After that, he is going to a city on May 3rd called Rancho Mirage, and I'm sort of looking this up online because, quite frankly, I have no idea where Rancho Mirage is. Morrissey at that show in Rancho Mirage on May 3rd will be playing at a casino. On May 5th, he will be in Tucson, Arizona followed by his only stop in the Lone Star State, at least on this particular run. On May 8th, he will be in San Antonio, Texas. Now, San Antonio is a city that I've only been to once in my entire life, and although I would say, yeah, San Antonio isn't necessarily my luggage, I would definitely take San Antonio over Dallas or Houston, although probably sounds very generic to say, generic Jim Johansson. But my favorite city in Texas has always been Austin. Now, you want to upset my wife, you want to offend her, if she's ever bugging you, if you're ever in the same room with my wife and she's annoying you, and you sort of want her to leave and sort of skedaddle it out of there, all you have to do is praise the state of Texas. Not any particular place in Texas, just Texas. All you have to do is say the word Texas, and it basically causes her to bust a spring, because my wife has no love for the state of Texas. I don't really understand where it comes from. Now, you go to Texas, you talk to Texans. Yes, sometimes they have an overly, glorious opinion of their state and their city. My wife and I went out to Austin, Texas several years ago to go see Echo and the Bunnymen at a place called Stubbs Barbecue. It was a great show. I thought it was a great venue. Definitely not a place that Morrissey would play, because as the band was playing, they were grilling up some animal right behind the stage. But I thought it was fine. My wife was not having a good time, though. She does not like Texas. So San Antonio is a city I've been to one time. After that, he's going to Oklahoma City on May 10th. Followed by St. Louis on May 12th, Atlanta on May 14th, before finishing up the tour down in Florida in St. Petersburg on the 16th. And as I mentioned before, he will be finishing up the American run of the 2025 Spring Tour on May 17th in Hollywood, Florida. Now, of course, when this tour was announced back in February, I was very excited about it, as I always am. Are you questioning me? Are you questioning my excitement? Should I stand up? Do you want to see my excitement? Because basically, I don't think you can handle this much excitement, son. But based on the last two tours that I've seen, both tours in which I saw two shows in 2023 and 2024, all four shows I saw on the last two tours in 2023, of course, was the 40th anniversary of Morrissey Tour, followed by the 2024 Fall Tour. I thought all four shows that I saw over the past two tours were actually very well done. Morrissey still looks great. He still sounds great. Now, if I had to choose one tour over the other as to which I thought the shows were better, I would say that the 2023 40th anniversary of Morrissey Tour was slightly better. I saw that tour twice. I saw that tour out here in Memphis and Nashville. I saw the tour the first night. It was 2 nights in a row. The first night was out in Memphis at a place called the Graceland Soundstage, a place that, honestly, of all the places, of all the venues that I've seen Morrissey over the years, it was probably my least favorite venue, despite the fact that Memphis is, and pretty much always has been, one of my favorite cities in the country. And of course, the venue is, if you haven't been to the Graceland Soundstage, the venue is brand new. It's very nice. It's right on the property. It's right across the street from the Graceland house. And me being a big Elvis dork is something that I absolutely appreciate. If I had to make a sort of quibble with the venue, the Graceland Soundstage, it was that the place is still really new. Now, it's very nice. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, that it's new, but it just feels a little bit sterile. I think it's one of those venues that in several years, once it gets a little bit of mileage on it, once it has some more beer spilled on the floor, it will be a little bit better. It was a place that, like I said, it was a little bit sterile. I didn't necessarily love the way that the floor was laid out, and I thought that Morrissey that night in Memphis was pretty good. The very next night, we saw him at a place here in Nashville called the Fisher Center, a place that is on the campus of Belmont University. Now, Belmont University, if you are unaware or unfamiliar, is a big music school, and of course, it has as big of an endowment as they possibly can imagine. So they built this venue, the Fisher Center, which also is relatively new, but the Fisher Center is absolutely unbelievable. It might be my favorite venue that I've ever seen Morrissey. I mean, I remember when that tour was announced in 2023, and of course I was very excited because he was coming to my area. It was not this was not a tour that I was going to have to do much traveling on. Not that I'm opposed to traveling to see Morrissey, because I'm certainly not, but the fact that he was playing literally right in my backyard was something that was, of course, very exciting. And this place, the Fisher Center in Nashville, was not a place that I had ever heard of before, a place at least I'd certainly never been. And I remember looking up the photographs of it online, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this place is pretty swanky. I think I'm going to feel out of place in that venue. And certainly my wife and I got there to the show, and the place is unbelievable. If you ever get a chance to come out here to Nashville and see any sort of a show, music event, anything at the Fisher Center, is something that I would definitely recommend. Of those two shows, I would definitely say that the show in Nashville was much better. The show in Memphis, I thought Morrissey sounded great. I thought he looked great. I thought the show was very good. Now, he was a little bit crabby the night in Memphis. He was complaining that he was a little bit sleep deprived because he was not happy with his accommodations from the night before, where he took an opportunity, multiple opportunities actually that night, to slam a place in Memphis that is a local landmark. It is actually a place that my wife and I have stayed at on several occasions. My wife and I actually ended up getting married in Memphis several years ago, and we spent our wedding evening in this particular venue. So I don't appreciate you knocking it, Steve. I mean, I get it. You're top shelf. I understand that. But not all of us are as pampered as you are, son. But he was railing on the Peabody Hotel, which to me, I don't know. I didn't really love that. I love the Peabody Hotel. I love Memphis. Like I said before, it is one of my favorite cities. Of those two shows, I thought the Nashville show was much better. He seemed to be in a much better mood. He seemed to be much more well-rested. The one thing that stands out the most about that show that I will always remember, the show in Nashville in 2023, is when he came out for his encore, he played the song Jack the Ripper, which, oh my God, one of the greatest live songs in the entire Morrissey canon. And of course, if you've ever seen that song live, you realize that it comes with a very dramatic stage production. It always has. It's just the jugs. That is one of the greatest live songs ever. And he came out and he played that song as the encore, and he just filled the entire room with smoke. So much, in fact, that he ended up setting off the smoke alarm, and the house lights came up, and it just killed the whole stage production. It didn't kill the song. Morrissey did end up finishing the song. He did come out after the incident with the smoke detector or the smoke alarm system during the song Jack the Ripper, and he made a joke that somebody from Columbia or Capitol Records, whatever it was in the audience, and they were trying to sabotage his show, which I thought was a very sort of comical moment. In 2024, Morrissey came out here once again. I saw that tour twice as well. The 2024 fall tour, I saw that show in Birmingham, Alabama, at the Alabama Theater towards the beginning of the tour. I thought that show was absolutely incredible. The next time I saw the 2024 tour, now originally I had planned on going to see that tour 2 nights in a row, or at least 2 shows in a row, because we were going to see the show at the Alabama Theater in Birmingham, and then the next night, I think it was the next night, we were actually planning on going to see the show in Knoxville at the Tennessee Theater. Now, something came up to where we weren't able to make it to the Knoxville show, so I ended up trading out the Knoxville show for a show towards the very end of that tour, which was at the Murat Theater in Indianapolis, a show that was very good as well. Now, of those 2 shows from the 2024 tour, I would easily take the show in Birmingham. I thought that he was absolutely incredible. I thought that the band sounded as good as they possibly can. Now, when I saw the show in Indianapolis, towards the end of the run, he was feeling, you could tell it was not necessarily the greatest show that I'd ever seen in my entire life. You could tell that he was feeling a little bit run down. He was a little bit tired. And understandably, it was sort of the end of the run. He announced during the show in Indianapolis that he wasn't necessarily feeling his best. I believe he said that he had flint throat. Not exactly sure what that is, but sort of paints a pretty vivid picture. But I would say, based on those last 2 tours, the 2023 and 2024 fall tour, I was very excited when this tour was announced, this show coming up. For me, of course, when these shows are announced, these tours are announced, I sort of think to myself, okay, geographically, what are the show or possibly multiple shows that I'm going to be able to make it to. Now, this show doesn't come necessarily super close to Nashville, this particular run of North American shows. So as I looked at the dates when it was announced, I sort of honed in immediately on two shows that are probably, I would say, sort of roughly equidistant between them and Nashville, that being the show on May 12th in St. Louis and the show on May 14th in Atlanta. Now, both St. Louis and Atlanta are, I would say they're relatively equidistant to Nashville. I would say that probably Atlanta might be slightly closer, but based on sort of geographic preference, I decided that I was going to do the St. Louis show on May 12th. Now, of course, I'd love to do the Atlanta show on May 14th. It's probably not really super in the cards to do both shows, at least for me. At least that was my thinking. So I went ahead and I purchased tickets for the show on May 12th in St. Louis. I chose the show in St. Louis, one, because it is a show that, like I said, it's about as close or as far away, depending on how you want to look at it, as the show from on the 14th in Atlanta. And honestly, this isn't a dig on Atlanta. Atlanta is a city I've been to before. Atlanta is a city that I like enough. It isn't necessarily my favorite place in the world, but St. Louis is a city that I absolutely love, and I have for a tremendous amount of time. I remember the first time that I ever went to St. Louis was probably in 2003 or so. I was on a road trip. At the time, I was living out in Chicago, and I took a road trip from Chicago down to St. Louis, from St. Louis to Memphis, from Memphis to Nashville, from Nashville to Louisville, from Louisville to Indianapolis, and then back up to Chicago. And St. Louis was a city that I hadn't really known that much about until I went there, and it was a city that I pretty much immediately fell in love with. It is a city, it is the type of city that I'm really drawn to. Now, I would say that the first time I ever went to St. Louis, I sort of made the mistake. Now, downtown St. Louis is great. Of course, you've got the Arch, which is something that I'm a total sucker for. I love sort of roadside Americana. I mean, I'm totally that guy that will drive an hour out of the way to see the world's biggest jock strap or whatever it is. And as I'm sitting there staring at the world's largest jock strap, I think to myself, yeah, you know, I might be able to make it work if I sort of squeeze the fellas together. You know, it might fit. But, you know, downtown St. Louis is one of those cities that, or St. Louis, I should say, is one of those cities where the downtown sort of rolls up at 5 o'clock and people sort of revert back to the neighborhoods. And I remember the first time I ever went to St. Louis, I thought to myself, wow, the Arch is really awesome. Like I said, it's iconic. It's roadside Americana. If you are a sports fan, if you're a fan of baseball, they have a wonderful ballpark. But it wasn't really until I went back to St. Louis the second time that I truly fell in love with the city, because the second time that I ever went to St. Louis was with my wife. Her and I were traveling to go to a show in St. Louis. This is actually the only show that I've ever been to in St. Louis previous to the show that I'm going to be going to in a couple of weeks up there. Now, the show in May for Morrissey is at a place that is called The Factory, which I think technically, and I was just looking this up recently, technically it says it is in a place called Chesterfield, Missouri. So I don't know. This is not a venue that I've been to. I don't know if Morrissey is playing the Burbs up in St. Louis. It definitely online, at least the pictures you can tell, as well as you can tell by the pictures online, it looks nice. It actually sort of reminds me, again, just based on photographs, of a venue that my wife and I went to here recently in Nashville, a place called The Pinnacle. My wife and I just recently went to go see Kraftwerk at this venue here in Nashville, and oh my God, that Kraftwerk show, that might be the best non-Morrissey related show I've seen in probably the last 5 or 6 years. Now, you ask my wife, she might disagree with you. In fact, she was not having a very good time. As her and I were driving downtown to go to the show, her and I put on Kraftwerk in the car. Yes, we're those people. I'm not proud of it. It isn't something that you try to turn into, but it's just something that you become as you get older. And my wife is considerably younger than I am. Kraftwerk isn't necessarily something that is on her radar, but to me, I mean, Kraftwerk, they're probably my top 5 favorite bands of all time. Now, yes, okay, I acknowledge it's only one original member, but what can you do, man? It's Kraftwerk. These guys aren't going to be around forever. I mean, Ralph Hooter is 80 years old. I mean, the day's going to come. I have to do it. I mean, in fact, when the Kraftwerk tickets went on sale, I sort of hedged a little bit. My wife and I, we just bought this house. We've had a bunch of work done. We're trying to sort of replenish our savings, you understand? But there's just some things that you have to do. So my wife and I were driving downtown to see Kraftwerk, and I'm jazzed, man. I mean, I've only seen Kraftwerk one other time before I got to see them just recently. And the whole time we're driving downtown, as we're listening to Kraftwerk in the car, I sort of get the sense that my wife is getting a little fidgety, and she says, so how long do they play for? And I told her, I was like, I don't know. I've only seen them one other time. I mean, it seemed like an average show, maybe 15, 16 songs. I mean, in my experience, when you go see an artist that you truly love, the show flies by. It always does. I said, yeah, last time I saw them, it was great. I don't know, maybe they played 10, 15 songs. I don't know, flew by. It definitely left me wanting more. And my wife said, okay, just, keep in mind, we have stuff to do tomorrow. And so we get downtown, we get to the venue. The venue was this place called the Pinnacle. Now, the reason why I brought this up is because it reminds me, at least based on pictures, of this place that Morrissey is playing out in St. Louis, this place called The Factory. And the Pinnacle is a new venue here in Nashville. And man, it is awesome. You talk about a perfect sounding room. Now, the one sort of quibble I will have about this place, The Pinnacle, is it reminded me a little bit of the place in Memphis that I saw Morrissey in 2023. The Graceland Soundstage, a place that, like I said before, it's probably my least favorite place that I've seen Morrissey play in the 14 shows that I've been to, just because it was a little bit sterile, and I didn't really love the layout of the floor. And to be perfectly honest with you, that place, the Graceland Soundstage, it feels almost more like a movie theater than it does a music venue. But this place, Pinnacle, was just awesome, except for the fact that it's brand new and it's a little bit sterile, and I'm way off the topic, I understand that, but if you haven't seen Kraftwerk, or if you get an opportunity to see this multimedia Kraftwerk thing that they do, oh my God, I can't recommend it enough. Now, of course, the whole time my wife is perched right here on my shoulder, chirping in my ear, when is this going to be over? I hate this. I hate you. I hate that you like this. The whole time I'm just sitting there trying to ignore her, like tunnel vision, like, oh, doop, 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 doop. And trying to picture her not sitting right here on my shoulder, but it's impossible. It's impossible. She's not very subtle when she's pouting, son. Anyway, my wife and I went to a show the only other show that I've been to in St. Louis was back in 2015. My wife and I went up to St. Louis from Tennessee. We were going up to St. Louis to see a band that her and I actually do agree on. Now, it doesn't happen very often. My wife and I do not always agree on music or pop culture. Now, keep in mind, like I said, she's much younger than I am. Kraftwerk means absolutely nothing to her, but to me, they're one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time. But we were going up to St. Louis to see a band that her and I both like. It's one of her favorite bands. I would not go that far, but it's a band of hers that I enjoy. It's a band that is from Toronto, Canada, if I'm not mistaken, a band called the Birthday Massacre. Now, if you're not super familiar with the Birthday Massacre, they are a band that is sort of cute, hot topic, girly, goth, synthy, new wavy, fun. They're a fun band. To me, they are a fun band. They are very enjoyable. They're great live. They are a band that we have seen several times over the years, and we went to see them at a venue in St. Louis called the Ready Room, which is in one of my favorite neighborhoods in St. Louis called the Grove. And they were actually opening for a band called Combuchrist, a band that I absolutely do not like at all. My wife fortunately agrees with that sentiment as well. So we basically went up there just to see the band Birthday Massacre, and then we wanted to skedaddle it out of there as quickly as possible, because that band Combuchrist stink, and they always have stunk, and if you disagree with it, the door is down those steps right there. Son, I didn't really know until I got turned on to the band Combuchrist, which is another dark day in the history of my life. I didn't realize that there was jock goth, but there is. And they're called Combu-Christ. But we went to this venue called the Ready Room in St. Louis, and the show was great, and my wife and I were standing outside after the band Birthday Massacre played. We were trying to plan our next move because it was still relatively early, and St. Louis is a great city. We were in the Grove, which is a great neighborhood, and suddenly the singer of this band, Birthday Massacre, just kind of comes walking past us. She's on her way out to our bus, and again, this is one of my wife's top 5, top 10 favorite bands of all time. And I sort of nudged her and I said, "Hey, isn't that the Birthday Massacre bird?" And my wife looked over, and my wife, nor do I, my wife doesn't normally do this. I don't normally do this ever, but my wife actually approached her, and her and my wife had quite a lovely conversations on the streets of St. Louis, although there was one sort of funny moment. My wife does not like me bringing this up, but I'm going to because this is my show. But apparently the singer of the band, the Birthday Massacre, has written a book, maybe multiple books, but the point is that my wife and her got on the topic of this book that she had written, and my wife had recently loaned this book to a friend of hers, and her friend was not necessarily a big fan of the book, and my wife and the singer of the band Birthday Massacre were talking about her book, and the fact that my wife liked the book, but the fact that her friend did not like the book, and she said, I lent your book to a friend of mine, and she really didn't like it, and the singer of the Birthday Massacre said, she's like, "Oh, well, that's okay, not everybody likes everything, it's all right, I don't take it personally, I'm not offended," and my wife's like, no, you have to understand, she really hated it, like venomously, like she thought it was garbage. She wanted to burn it. And the singer for the Birthday Massacre was like, "Oh, okay, I got it. Thank you for coming. Thanks for buying a shirt. I'm gonna go now." But really, that was the only other show that I've been to in St. Louis. I'm very excited, of course, to go to see this show at the Factory in Chesterfield, St. Louis. For me, this will be my 5th show. Over the past 2.5 years, I think this is my 5th Morrissey show post-COVID. This will be my 15th show. Overall, as I mentioned before, I was very excited about this tour because I thought the quality of the last 2 tours were very good, as Morrissey does every year. Every tour, he always sort of changes things up. It is my goal to go into this show as ignorantly as possible. I don't like spoilers. I don't like getting on social media. I don't like knowing what is coming up, especially, and this is going to sound hokey, especially, yes, I'm a man in his 40s, but being on the road, driving to a Morrissey show, especially driving 4.5 hours to go up to St. Louis to go to a Morrissey show, it's just fun in my head to sort of imagine what he's going to be playing, what songs he's going to be hearing, what songs I do want to hear, what songs I don't want to hear. Now, as I mentioned before, this last 2 tours I thought were really good. I think if you haven't seen Morrissey post-COVID, this is something that you should certainly do. I think he still sounds great. I still think he looks great now. If I had to choose which of the 2 tours I liked better, 2023, 2024, I mentioned that I think I would take the 2023 tour over the 2024 tour, despite the fact that both were great, and despite the fact that actually I thought that the set list in 2024 was a little bit better. I thought that the band just played a little bit better in 2023. In 2023, Morrissey definitely hit the You Are the Quarry album fairly intensely. I think part of that, and I don't know this is just my opinion, but I think one reason why he hit You Are the Quarry so heavily in 2023 was because he had originally planned on doing those shows at the beginning of the year in Southern California to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the You Are the Quarry album. Of course, those shows never happened. They blew up. They got canceled sort of at the last second. It is my opinion. It's sort of always been my opinion that those shows got canceled based on sort of soft ticket sales. Again, those were supposed to be arena shows. I don't know at this point in the game, as much as I love you, Steve, as much as you're my dude, there's really nothing you could do at this point in time to alienate me apart from showing up to my house and burning it down yourself. I just don't think you're an arena act. I think that you are a theater act, and I think that those shows, I think that they, at least in the United States, I don't think you're an arena act. I think that those shows had soft sales. Prove me wrong if that isn't exactly what happened. I mean, again, the excuse Morrissey gave, I thought was relatively flimsy. My wife and I had tickets for the show at the Honda Center in Anaheim, and to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't exactly stoked that he canceled those shows at the last second, but I thought the set list in 2023 was awesome. Like I said, he hit You Are the Quarry pretty heavy. The one thing I will say about the set list in 2023 that I thought was also surprising, another thing that was surprising was, I expected him to, hit his catalog a little bit differently than he did. I thought he would go a little bit deeper. There were certainly albums that were totally omitted, albums that I didn't necessarily think that he would leave out of the 40th anniversary set list. I thought that he was going to celebrate more of his entire catalog, but 2023, those shows were really nothing to complain about. Last year in Birmingham, in Indianapolis, the set list was very different than it was in 2023. I always say this is one of the great things, one of the fun things, the best things about still going to see Morrissey. 40 years into his career, like I said, this is going to be the show in St. Louis. It's going to be my 15th show. It is my goal. It is my hope to make it to 20 before Morrissey decides to hang it up. Now, Morrissey has hinted, he suggested that he's not really planning on retiring anytime soon. I can't imagine him retiring anytime soon. He's not a guy that's going to go, as he's said this is his joke, not mine. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and play 18 holes of golf a day. That just isn't his personality. This is what he does. This is what he loves to do. He's still great at it. He's still, I would say, relatively on top of his game. And in 2024, I thought he hit Ringleader of the Tormentors. I think that was the thing that surprised me. Well, two things that surprised me the most in 2024. One being that he hit Ringleader of the Tormentors so heavily. I mean, I had not heard a lot of the songs off of Ringleader of the Tormentors since that tour back in 2006. I think that tour actually hit Seattle in 2007. And, that I've said it before, people always disagree with me, which is fine. Which is totally fine. You're free to disagree with whatever I say. Nobody should agree with everything that anybody says. But I've always said that to me, Ringleader of the Tormentors is, it's one of my lesser albums in Morrissey's catalog. And in the set list in 2024, in particular, one thing that really sort of stood out to me as sort of a weird negative and positive was that he played my least favorite song in his entire catalog, that being Dear God, Please Help Me. It was a song that I had never heard before, a song I never, ever expected to hear at this point in the game. Again, I'll sort of keep beating this dead horse, but the fun thing about going to see Morrissey is you just never know. Every year, you never know, man. I've gone to see other bands from his era, other legacy bands like Billy Idol, Devo, Echo and the Bunnymen, all bands I love, but you go see those bands now. And I mean, especially, and this is probably another one of my, if they're not my top 5, they're very close. Echo and the Bunnymen. I mean, that's a band that I've seen live a bunch of times. I love them. They are incredible live to this day. They're incredible live. I think Ian McCulloch is one of the coolest, best frontmen of all time. But I mean, I could pretty much walk into a show and I could read the set list. I could go into a show ignorantly and I could know the set list before they even start playing, because that's just how predictable they are. But Morrissey's totally the opposite way. In 2024, like I said, he hit Ringleader of the Tormentors a lot harder than I expected to. And one of the cool things I thought about the 2024 tour was he played 4 songs off of this still, upcoming album, Bonfire of Teenagers, which was something that I had personally not really seen Morrissey do since 2002. I think I've talked about this on this channel before. I mean, I went to go see Morrissey in 2002 in Seattle. It was at the Paramount Theater. I'm pretty sure that was the Greatest Hits or Best Of tour. I'm not exactly sure which one it was at this point in time. It was 2002, and I remember at that show specifically, he played 3 songs that would eventually be on his new album, which was, of course, You Are the Quarry, which is one of the greatest albums of all time, and all of those songs were just incredible live. They were all songs that I'd never heard before, and in 2024 he did the same thing on the last tour, where he played 4 songs off of the upcoming Bonfire of Teenagers album. Of course, he played the song Rebels Without Applause, which was the first single. Now, As we've talked about, Morrissey's always been pimping this album, Bonfire of Teenagers, as the greatest thing he's ever done. Now, here we are about a third of the way through 2025 already, and unless I'm mistaken, and again, I could be. If I am, feel free to let me know, but I've heard absolutely no news in regards to the Bonfire of Teenagers saga, which has continued on since 2021. Of course, he's always pimping this as the greatest album he's ever done, and I've said this before, it's not my expectation that it will be. It's not my expectation that it should be. I mean, if you're going to tell me, if you're going to sit there and tell me that you're going to make an album that's as good as The Queen is Dead or Bone of Drag or Meat is Murder, I mean, it's just not going to happen. Not at this point in the game. My expectations are relatively reasonable. All I would like is to make this album as good as the last couple. I thought Dog on a Chain was very good. Not classic material, but very good. California Sun, I think, is very good. Now, Low in High School, yeah, it's got its great moments. It's not great all the way through, but make it as good as Low in High School, and I'll be a satisfied customer. But of course, when he released, I should say, Rebels Without Applause as the first single, I thought to myself, holy shit, this is one of the best songs he's done in a long time. Now, some of the other songs he played in 2024, he played, of course, The Telephone Rings, which is a song he played in 2023, which was one of the bummers, I thought, of the set list in 2023, was he played, of course, The Telephone Rings, and he didn't play Rebels Without Applause, which was a song I was just dying to hear live. Ever since that single came out, I've just been dying to hear that song live. In fact, in 2024, when he did play it live, I thought that the performance of that song in Birmingham was really good, but man, the second night I saw that tour in Indy towards the end of that run, when they played Rebels Without Applause, I don't know, that song had no life when I saw that show in Indy. In fact, that was, as much as I love that song, which I do, I would sort of make the argument that it was one of the sort of lower points of that show. He also played the song I Am Veronica, which, I like a lot. It isn't necessarily Rebels Without Applause, but I thought it was really good. And he played the song I X Love You, which, it's okay. It's very much a Morrissey song lyrically. I mean, to me, the four songs I've heard, at least live, off of the Bonfire of Teenagers album, if it's ever released, is, there's one song I absolutely love, which is Rebels Without Applause. To me, like I said, it's one of the best newer songs he's done over the last several years. I like the song I X Love You. I like the song I Am Veronica. I X Love You is okay, and I still just don't really like, of course, The Telephone Rings. I've seen, of course, The Telephone Rings 4 times live now, because he played it in 23 and 24, all 4 shows, and I would say by the end of the last show in Indianapolis, I thought, all right, I don't hate it. It's kind of starting to grow on me a little bit, but still, it's not really a song I love. So of the 4 songs that are supposed to be on, Bonfire of Teenagers, I mean, I sort of run the gamut with emotions in terms of my feelings for them, but I really couldn't be any more excited to go see the show in St. Louis. Like I said before, St. Louis is a city I love. I am planning on going up there a little bit early. Of course, I always do this, but there are a few places I'd like to plug in St. Louis if you are somebody that has never been to St. Louis, if you're coming into St. Louis for the Morrissey show. Now, keep in mind, I will be at the Morrissey show. If you happen to run into me, I'm more than happy to sign autographs, take pictures, have a drink with you. But keep in mind, okay, let's just keep in mind, ground rules. Once the show starts, let's make Steve the focal point, okay? I don't need to be the center of attention. During the show, we're all there to see Steve. Yes, I'm happy to, give my fans everything that they want, but at the end of the day, we're there to see Steve. But on a serious note, there are a couple things that I have to plug in St. Louis if you're somebody that is heading into the city or somewhere that you have not, if it's a city that you have not ever been. One being one of my favorite record stores, which is, of course, places that I always have to check out. Those are the ways that I always gauge a city. One of my favorite record stores ever is Vintage Vinyl up in St. Louis. It is in the neighborhood. I'm not exactly sure what the neighborhood's called. I think it might be called Blueberry Hill, but it's over by Washington University Be sure to check out the vintage vinyl. Also, A Place in the Grove, which there's another record store in the Grove. I don't exactly remember the name of it right now. It's a smaller sort of boutique record store, but there is a place in the Grove, which I absolutely cannot wait to go. It's a place that my wife and I always frequent. It is a place called the Gramophone, and if you are a sandwich guy... Now, I know what you're going to think. Yes, Jim, we can tell that you're a sandwich guy. We can tell that you like to throw back the carbs, son. Yes, I am a sandwich guy, okay? Is that a problem? Is that a crime? Is it wrong to throw back a sandwich and some suds? Check out a place called the Gramophone. That place is absolutely the jugs. Now, one other thing I am sort of curious about. When it comes to seeing Morrissey on this particular tour, like I said before, this will be my 5th show since COVID, my 15th show overall. I'm sort of curious to see the state of Morrissey's band. Now, this is one sort of topic that I've discussed with other Morrissey fans. I've said this on this channel before. Morrissey fans are as loyal and devout as any other fan base in the history of music. But that being said, I don't necessarily think that we are the tightest knit community in the world. I think that is because that the Morrissey fan community, like the artist himself, I think fan bases are oftentimes reflection of the artist. Morrissey is an individualist. I think most of the people that sort of exist in his fan base are individualists, and therefore we aren't necessarily the best members of a community. But one thing that I have heard a lot of agreement on when it comes to people within the Morrissey fan community is the current state of his band, that being that this is probably one of, if not one of the weaker bands that Morrissey has ever toured with, at least in my 30 plus years of fandom. I saw Morrissey for the first time back in 1997, and I've seen him 14 times since, and this is the band that, at least in my opinion, is probably the weakest of the bands that he's toured with. Now, my wife disagrees. She thought that the band was excellent. I've talked to a lot of other Morrissey fans that agree with me, that think that this band is not necessarily the best band he's ever toured with. Now, of course, he's going to state otherwise. He's going to say that this is one of the greatest bands he's ever had. But I don't want to accuse the guy of lying. But Morrissey at times has a tendency to be a little bit cheeky, a little bit sort of, I don't know if he's being ingenuine, but you sort of wonder. And when he says that this is the greatest band he's ever had, it sort of makes me wonder, because of course it's not true. We all know, at least in terms of the solo career, the greatest band that Morrissey's ever had is the classic band, the Gary Day, Alan White, Boz Bohr, Spencer Coburn band. And yeah, maybe we can't go back to those days again. Like I said earlier, I can never have not heard Korn. Unfortunately, those days are past. Maybe the days are gone when we're going to see the classic Morrissey band. But this band in particular is not a band that I'm absolutely in love with. That is another reason I would say I would take over the last 2 tours, 2023 and 2024. I would actually take the 2023 tour over the 2024 because although I thought the 2024 set list was good, I thought the show was interesting, especially the show in Birmingham. Like I said, the show in Indy was a little bit, not as... He wasn't as energetic as you would like. The band on that 2024 tour, they were certainly not as good as they were in 2023. Now, you would expect it to be the opposite. You would expect that the band would get better. They would become tighter. I felt like they were sloppier in 2024, and especially at the show in Indianapolis. Now, again, I mentioned this before. Morrissey wasn't necessarily at the height of his energy level in 2024 at the Indianapolis show, but it seemed like the band were really unlively as well. I don't know if they were sort of playing off his energy, if the whole band was just fatigued, worn out, lethargic, I don't know. But that show in Indianapolis that they played at the Murat Theater was not their best. In fact, they played the song Rebels Without Applause, which in 2024 was one of the songs I was most excited to hear. And when they played that song in Birmingham, I thought they really killed it. But the show in Indianapolis, man, it played just a really lifeless version of that song. So I'm sort of curious to see, of course, what the set list is going to be in St. Louis. I absolutely cannot wait. Following the North American run on this tour, Morrissey will take a couple of weeks off to celebrate his 66th birthday. before kicking off the European tour, the European leg of this tour, I should say, on May 31st in Dublin, Ireland. And that European tour runs through August 3rd in Ostuni, Italy, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. I'm terrible at pronunciation. But if I'm not mistaken, and again, I could be this, if you combine both legs of this 2025 spring tour, I think that this would have to be Morrissey's most ambitious run post-COVID. So here's to wishing you luck, Steve. We love you. Hopefully you make it all the way through, like I said. Tonight he is in Reno, Nevada, kicking off the North American leg of the 2025 tour, and absolutely excited, cannot wait. Always the case. Always excited to see Mr. Stephen Patrick Morrissey when it comes to seeing these shows live. Now, as I mentioned before, it is now a third of the way through 2025, and as of yet, we have not really heard any news, or at least I haven't heard any news, in regards to the new album Bonfire of Teenagers. I don't know if this is something that he has just completely thrown onto the back burner. Of course, according to Morrissey, there are 2 albums that are actually pretty much finished and in the can. Behind Bonfire of Teenagers, he has the album Without Music the World Dies. And this is something that I've talked about. A lot of other people have talked about in the fan community. I was at a show last year. I was talking to somebody in line, and we were talking about the Bonfire of Teenagers melodrama. And this person and I both agreed that if Morrissey were serious about releasing this album, if this is in fact the greatest thing he's ever done and something that he genuinely wants to be put out into the marketplace, that this is something that he could easily self-release, perhaps something that he should consider self-releasing. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. I've said this before, and I do believe it to be true, that although I don't think that this is necessarily what he wants, I do think that Morrissey sees himself as a martyr, and I think that this album is something that he is willing to sacrifice in order to stand up for what he believes in. Now, as a fan, of course, I want to hear the record. I want it to be released. I want it on vinyl. I want it on CD. I want the whole thing. I want the tour. I want the whole shebang, as they say. I just don't know if it's going to happen. In absence of a new album, though, I think that Morrissey's doing the right thing, going back out on tour, pressing flesh with the people that love him so dearly. Again, the guy's going to be 66 years old in less than a month. I don't know how much longer we have to go see him. So if you haven't seen him, or if you're planning on going and see him on this tour, I would highly recommend it. Like I said before, the last 4 shows that I've seen over the past 2 tours have been absolutely the jug. So it is my prediction that we will not be disappointed. And like I said before, hopefully the new album will be released relatively soon. I don't know. I haven't gotten any wind of it. Anyway, man, this is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you, as always, for checking out this video. I have a bunch of stuff written and ready to go, so hopefully we'll get this channel back up and running again. I realize that this video was a little bit out of practice. I'm probably rambling on a little bit more than I normally do as it is, but I'm very excited to be back. Very excited to see Morrissey in just a couple of weeks out there in St. Louis. Anyway, man, be sure to go out and support your local record store, like Vintage Vinyl in St. Louis, Missouri. I'll be out there in a couple of weeks, so you better roll out the red carpet, sons. Check back for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And I don't know, man, unless we've got anything else, I think that's just about going to do her. So until next time, my friends, talk to you then.